We are going to look at third-party risk today. Now, why we're doing this at this point, I'm not really sure, because we already covered a lot of this stuff in E1 and E2 when we studied risk. But anyway, third-party risk. Assign, manage, and monitor the risk of doing business with third parties and their subcontractors. So multi-tier suppliers and contractors. Most supply chain networks are tiered, so tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, etc. These tiers are often both suppliers and customers of each other. And a risk assessment of tier 1 suppliers must examine their relationship to the second and third tier suppliers as well. Question to ask of the tier 1 supplier risk assessment programs regarding their suppliers. How often is the performance of suppliers reviewed? And is the risk presented by suppliers assessed and mitigated? So when you go to visit your tier 1 suppliers, these are the questions you ask them. So the second tier suppliers, often referred to as subcontractors, but not around here, should be examined by the first tier suppliers. So first tier needs to be responsible for the second tier. Second tier needs to be responsible for third tier, etc. The relationship between the first and second tier suppliers often determines the level of risk in a supply chain. So here, the red ones, the S1, that's the tier 1 suppliers. They sell directly to the buyer, which is the blue blob here. Tier 2 are the purple guys, the S2. There's 2 of them. They sell their parts to the tier 1s. There's 2 tier 1 networks here. And then tier 3, they sell their parts to the tier 2s. So S1, tier 1 is responsible for tier 2, and tier 2 is responsible for tier 3. But as you can see, the problem with this supply chain is the tier 3. These guys may be making some kind of fastener, titanium bolt, and they're the only ones that make it. So what happens if they go down? The entire supply chain collapses. So this would be a risk you would have to mitigate against. You would need some substitute part to go to. Third-party service providers, such as transportation and logistics organizations, in fact, our parlance, it would be our MSS, manufacturing and service support organizations, must not be overlooked. Third-party service provider operations may contain greater potential supply risk than tier 1 or tier 2, depending on what they're doing for us. Risk throughout the life cycle. So supplier onboarding risk may represent itself in the form of incomplete or invalidated information. So you need to build up a supplier profile, developed and stored in a central location. And the supplier profile should be editable by all stakeholders for the supplier. I don't know that I agree with that. I think the more you limit who can change it, the better off you're going to be. Oops. But these guys are saying purchasing, engineering, manufacturing all need to be able to get in and change stuff in the supplier. Day-to-day management, daily operations have risks, usually stock out or delivery risk, and suppliers should be monitored for on-time delivery and quality on an ongoing basis. PPMs, did they get the stuff here on time? So critical inflection points in the business cycle. So inflection points can be ramp up for production, introduction of a new product, or expansion into a new market. Assessment of the supply base to support these events should be made. Potential alternate sources should be identified. So this is quantity, basically. The inflection point is right here where it kind of goes flat, or here, it's changing direction. Going from concave to convex, back to concave. End of life, product is in the last stage of its life before it's discontinued. Main concern for supply base is availability. Possible strategies, you can find alternate suppliers or materials, or substitute products, or develop smaller suppliers. And then end of life cycle for our trucks or our own products. Got to mitigate the risk of having inventory and supplier commitments because our supply chains for these trucks are very long. And there's 6 months of supply out there that we might be liable for. Risk can be mitigated by effective and continuous internal communication between supply management, marketing, and product development. When we phase out these trucks, everybody has to coordinate. Level of involvement, organizational standards should develop standards for dealing with risks that contain the following requirements. Risk management responsibilities. What does the commodity manager have to do? Necessary resources are available to follow the standards. Organizational culture. Sources of risk may be identified and clearly understood. And appropriate action plans and standards are congruent with the organization's risk appetite. Recognized external standards for risk management, ISO 31000, 2009. Well, it may have been updated since then, but it's ISO 31000. And then there's Risk Practitioner's Guide, ISO 31000, 2018. Risk Management Standard, supported by the Institute of Risk Management and adopted by the Federation of European Risk Management Associations, FIRMA. So these two are, this is an ISO document here. I'm going to give you some background on how to do it. And this is a European standard document here. But talks about risk and how to manage it and work it in the company. Committee of sponsoring organizations, enterprise risk management. So here's another risk management framework. This is just a PowerPoint deck. And then there's the Red Book. This is a risk management model also. This is quite long. So it just talks about how to do risk management in the company. Developed by the Open Compliance and Ethics Group. Plan, assess, and improve capability in order to achieve principal performance. The risk heat map. We've talked about this before. Visual tool for differentiating risks. Risks are defined in 2 dimensions. Likelihood of occurrence and impact or severity. So step 1 is to estimate the probability of occurrence. This is part of risk assessment. And you can do risks in A, B, C, D, or you can do a 1 to 10. And then you estimate the likely impact on the company. How much will it cost? Again, you can do categorical or you can do 1 to 10. And then you develop a risk profile, determine the company's tolerance. And then, here's the red is bad, yellow is the boundary. Well, red, yellow is kind of neutral. The blue here is the risk boundary, and the green is good. Then you got 2 risk events here. So the number 2 is fine. Number 1 is not good because it's on the other side of the risk boundary. We have to mitigate that somehow. And the way we mitigate it is we take resources from 2, which moves it into the neutral, and then but also moves 1 into the neutral also. So John Deere Risk Management Tool combines financial risk information with daily internet searches, which, you're searching the news, it's already happened. Uses Moody's and Dun & Bradstreet's to monitor supplier ownership, changes in payment performance, etc. Daily press releases. It doesn't hurt, but a lot of these things cost a lot of money. Basic steps in business continuity planning, disruption scanning, disruption assessment, mitigation, implementing plans, evaluating the effectiveness of the plan, and then improving them. So there's 4 main strategies for dealing with the risk. There's mitigation, developing an action plan to lessen the risk. Transference to another party, usually an insurance company or some kind of market hedging strategy. There's avoidance. You just say, we're not going to mess with that because the risk event is too high. And then there's assumption, the do nothing option. Contingency plan needs to be developed. So those are your four: mitigation, transference, avoidance, and assumption. Controlling, monitoring methods. So this is a suggestion from these two authors. Risk identification, benchmarking, compare your organization to other leading organizations, process mapping, risk monitoring, disruption assessment, risk mitigation, and resolution techniques, good supply management practices, supplier selection, supplier monitoring, supplier segmentation with your Kralik matrix, other strategies you can use to mitigate risk, dual or multi-sourcing, geographical diversification, inventory pooling. So serving two or more separate markets using common inventory stock, and part standardization. Contract language, talk about what defective products, supplier delivery failure, product availability, intellectual property loss, price volatility, things you can all address in the contracts. Hedging through the commodity markets. Near sourcing, which is moving supply from Asia to maybe Mexico. And postponement. Delay customer required customization of the product until as late as possible in the supply chain. So don't do the customization at tier 3. Here's this, it's called a supply chain value analysis map, but it's really just a supply chain map with some other stuff in it. It just shows you where you're getting all the parts and how you're transporting them, with some details from each of the factories. So having these maps can be handy when you start having problems. All right. Sue Jones is a category manager for ABC Company. Her boss has come to her and told her to report back on the readiness of tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers to handle the upcoming inflection point. They're getting ready to ramp up. So what is the best answer for what her boss is talking about? Changes in the business cycle or demand curve of ABC Company, potential legal enforcement, engineering study, a change in production volume at ABC. So B and C you can probably throw out. It's going to be A or D. And they're talking about an inflection point, so I'm thinking it's going to be the demand curve. Let's see what we got here. Yep. Anticipated change for demand in company's products. What are the 4 main risk management strategies? All right. Mitigation, transference, expediting. So expediting isn't one of them. Avoidance, transference, assumption, mitigation. That could be. Assumption, resolution isn't one. Mitigation, resolution. Yeah, I got resolution in both of them, so it's got to be B. B it is. All right. There's 8 questions out there, or sorry, 5 questions out there. So go ahead and start working on them. Raise your hand when you get done. All right, let's go over some answers here. Number one is Charlie. Likelihood or probability of a risk event will occur and the impact or severity of the event. If event does occur, is how risk is measured. Two is Bravo, because writing up a supplier profile and putting an essential location a number of people can get and would be the best answer. Although I also liked C. Option C is incorrect because although a follow-up call would be a good thing to do, it does not get at the root problem. It does nothing to solve it, although it checks to see if it got fixed. 3 is Alpha. Risk matrix will provide essential information for supply management's discussions with engineering and executive management. 4 is Bravo, because the product is at the end of its life cycle. In order to prevent a large amount of obsolescence and being accumulated, supply management, marketing, and product development and manufacturing are all going to have to work as one team. So everybody knows what the plan is. Then 5 is Delta. Is an interesting little math problem. Includes both the general risk fund amount, which is $45,000, and half of the contractor's risk fund for which PQRs assume. So half of the contractor's risk fund of 130 is 65. And then the general risk fund, which can also be used for electrical issues, is 45, total of 110. That's all I got for you.